new information from that DOJ watchdog report on James Comey questioning his motivation for briefing then-President-elect Trump on the Steele dossier. My next guest says Comey could still face charges despite the IG's decision not to prosecute him. California Congressman Devin Nunes is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, good morning to you. So what is your thinking on whether or not he could face charges or there could eventually be indictments?
Well, I have to remind the audience that the House Intelligence Committee Republicans, we sent over 8 criminal referrals. 2 of those involved conspiracy. Take you back to when James Comey testified before Congress. He writes a lot in a book, he talks a lot to the media, but when he answered the questions to Congress, he didn't answer very many questions. He didn't recall, couldn't remember. So there was a lot left unanswered there. What this IG report does is it clearly it shows with clairvoyance that Comey, McCabe, all of these guys at the very top, even Weissman, we now know from the IG report. So the IG report, even though it didn't lead to a prosecution, it's a tremendous amount of evidence that would build into the case that we've been making that there was, in fact, a conspiracy here, and that's what the Justice Department should be looking at. Conspiracy to break many laws, but
what exactly is that evidence,
most importantly, and I think this is, well, when you look at manipulation of intelligence or lying to the FISA court for political purposes, you now know the evidence that we have is that Comey wasn't going to brief the president just to get him up to speed. He was acting as if he was an agent working for the Crossfire Hurricane team. So that is clear evidence that he was involved in this, where before he's tried to pretend that he's like a step or two away from what happened. He always pretends like he doesn't know what happened with the FISA situation. He doesn't know what happened with the intelligence. Well, the IG report really makes clear that that's not the case when you read through 80 pages.
So this was sent to the DOJ. The DOJ decided ultimately not to prosecute. You're suggesting that that does not mean that the former FBI director is out of the woods just yet. But people are going to press you, Congressman, on what exactly you know that would lead to that. And you're saying that this would come down to the district attorney to make the decision here.
Yeah, so we know that Bill Barr has asked the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut to look at everything, the origins of this investigation. Because remember, in the Mueller report that came out, even though it cleared and exonerated Donald Trump, it really didn't answer the very basic questions that we've been looking to as House Republicans, all right? So who are all these characters that started this investigation? How did this begin? How do you use our secret, most powerful capabilities in this country that are designed to go after foreigners, go after bad guys? How does that system get turned around to target an American political campaign for president, nonetheless? So those are the types of questions that Durham, the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, needs to answer. From that, the evidence that we've gathered over our 2.5-year investigation, we've made specific criminal referrals specifically on conspiracy to fraud the FISA court. Now, and that's why I'll just repeat again, Sandra, the Comey always pretended that he wasn't part of that. But in fact, he signed those. And if you look at now that he was actually being used to run in and actually brief the president, but really what he was doing, he was actually interrogating the president and then using that information and feeding it right back into the Crossfire Hurricane team at a time when Congress nor the president-elect knew that he was under investigation.
Finally, Catherine Herridge has obviously been doing some extensive reporting and digging into the exact wording and information in that report and leading up to the next report. But looking at how James Comey treated his notes from the Trump Tower briefing in Jan 2017, and he treated them like highly classified, highly sensitive, I should say, FISA intelligence. Why did he do that is the question.
That's a very good question, because it's interesting that they would choose those words. Now, what I believe is that they ran this entire investigation under what's so-called counterintelligence because you can go to secret courts. You don't have to report what you're doing. You run under a different set of guidelines. Unlike criminal, and I think I think most Americans understand this, but if you're under some type of criminal investigation, you would have a grand jury involved. You know, some of your peers would be involved in whether or not you could get a warrant or not. But the counterintelligence investigation, not only let them do two things. One, let them run it in a very small, closed circle of people, of which now we know Comey was one of those people. And also was very careful about who could get access to that information, because remember, counterintelligence, and I'll go back to what I said, is supposed to be used to target spies, to target terrorists, you know, foreigners. And I think that is the key, and I'm sure that's what Catherine Herridge is looking into.
I'm running out of time, only a few seconds thought. All right, I'm running out of time, but was he acting within or outside of his authority, based on that answer?
You know, I think the question the question that we need to have answered is that how is it that the Crossfire Hurricane team, the team looking into President Trump, how did they get to decide what was classified or not classified? I think that's a very important question.
Okay, I'm running out of time. Congressman, great to have you on the program this morning. We'll have you back soon. Appreciate it. Thank you.